This episode of Ask Scott and Jenny on the Juicebox Podcast is brought to you by Companion Medical, makers of the InPen. To learn more about InPen, go to companionmedical.com or click on the links in your show notes or at juiceboxpodcast.com. Are you wondering why I want you to visit companionmedical.com? Well, that's simple. Because InPen is America's only FDA-cleared smart insulin pen and app system. When you get to companionmedical.com, you'll discover that InPen combines an innovative diabetes management app with a Bluetooth-enabled pen injector. This will simplify the constant tracking, monitoring, and calculating required for insulin therapy. With InPen, MDI users are able to live life less complicated. Welcome to Ask Scott and Jenny. These are the episodes where Jenny Smith from Integrated Diabetes Services. Now, Jenny, you may know, has had diabetes for decades. She's a pump trainer. She's a CDE. She's, I think once she went to the moon. I don't remember exactly, but she's done a lot of different things, right? She's also a nutritionist. Listen, she's everything you want. Why are you arguing with me? I know you're not arguing with me. And anyway, Jenny and I, we answer questions from you guys. They're left on the Bold with Insulin Facebook page. I ask for them every once in a while. I do it real sleek. I go like this. Yo, does anybody have any questions for me and Jenny? And then people leave questions, and then we answer them. Anyway, today we're going to talk about growth spurts, the 670G from Medtronic, loop tips, and a little bit about control IQ. What do you think of that? Okay, then. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise, and to always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Laura says, kids and growth spurts. Is it a gradual increase or an all-at-once change? Is it something that you notice they need more of all of a sudden? And she gives her example: toddlers 4, almost 5, still close to the same ratios, ISF and basal, from when he came out of honeymooning. I know he's going to hit a growth spurt soon, and I guess she's looking for, like, how do I know when it happens, and what do I do? And I think this falls under the auspice of those. Of the idea that I just want somebody to tell me how much or when. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, give me a number or an idea. And I don't know that there's a specific answer. I have a general answer, but I wonder what you think about it and what you see.
Yeah, and my answer is probably similar to your general answer, honestly. There's not going to be a specific, like, you're always going to see 25% more insulin needed, right? I mean, it could be over several growth spurts that you notice, gosh, she always needs like an extra 0.1 added or an extra 25% or whatnot, but it's not that cut and dry by any means. One specific time, though, that most parents with kids with diabetes and parents of teens with diabetes will notice the heaviest impact of growth with a surge for only, a short amount of time is evening, where their kids go to bed, they've had things really nicely contained, and all of a sudden they get these like spikes. Almost as soon as the kid is snoring, like their head hits the pillow, they're snoring, and up it goes. They've been at this beautiful 111, and up it goes. And they fight it and fight it and fight it. And it could be an all-night fight, depending on how strong the growth surge is. And in those instances, it's, okay, let's try. I usually encourage people to try first a temporary basal increase rather than shooting it with like a dose of 3 units of insulin and then chasing the drop down. A temp basal increase, that might be significant. Maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 100% more for a time period. See where it levels off. When does it start coming down? You can always shut off a temp basal, right? And then if you learn from that, let's say 2 nights in a row, you start to see this surge. On the second night, when it gets going, you hit that temp basal again, similar to the night before if it controlled well. If it wasn't quite enough and you still fought a high, pump it up even more. But then once that growth spurt is sort of over, they may need not as much like as the temp basal you were giving to offset the rise, but their overnight needs may definitely go up. They were at 0.2, their growth spurt needed a 50% increase overnight for that time period. And now instead of being at 0.2 an hour, now they're at 0.3 or 0.35. And that might be where they sit for a time period until another growth spurt happens.
Is that going to be because there's more body mass? Like you've actually grown, there's more of you, or
potentially, or just the changes that, right. I mean, in little kids, especially little kids, I sometimes, with mine, especially my almost 3-year-old, sometimes he wakes up in the morning and I'm like, you grew.
Looks like all at once it hits.
Right? You just all of a sudden you look bigger, or you look like your cheeks are slimmer, or, it just looks bigger. And, so sure, it wasn't technically overnight that he just shot up, but you can suddenly kind of see it. And people who are attuned to their kids, especially parents with little kids who you're following so many more things than just which truck they want to play with, staring at them constantly. And, with diabetes, you pay attention to so many things. So you could, like I said, see a tremendous need in a growth spurt period, and then it levels off, but it doesn't come back down to where they were before the growth spurt.
Right. I have to say, I think the idea of looking for physical clues is brilliant because I know our son, his calves would get thicker. Like all of a sudden you'd look at him and his calves would be out of proportion with the rest of his body, larger, and then sure enough he would get taller. It was almost like his body was like, okay, we're getting ready to do this. And it would store things in certain places, or something would get bigger sooner. It was just really, it never failed as he was growing. And I have to say too, door jam that you don't mind drawing on with a pencil is great as you have children. People with younger kids, I'm sure you're doing this, but it gets really fun a decade later when you're like, stand there for a second, and you get to see how they move up. I would say the answer to this question to me is the core of the podcast, right? Oh, hold on a second. Arden needs a little help with her bolus for a second.
That's okay.
What is 6 times?
We don't use the door jam. We use my mother-in-law, when our first was born, bought us this measurement tree. Okay. And you put it on the wall and kind of pop it in. And same thing, same idea. You just push the hash marks onto the tree as the child grows. But the nice thing is that we've used one side of the tree for Oscar and the other side of the tree for Conan. So we can see where they both are. And it's kind of fun to now be able to see where was Oscar and is Conan meeting about the same, or is he getting bigger faster, or are they growing about the same? It's kind of fun.
It really is. I have to say, my wife has told me, without a doubt, if we ever sell this house, she's like, you have to pry that board off the wall and replace it for the new owner because I'm taking it with me. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I was going to say is that I think this is one of those questions that if you just caught me, if you texted me real quickly and asked me this question, I would say to you, this is why the podcast is terrific, because you are running into an insulin need and it's saying to you, I need more insulin, give it more insulin. Mm-hmm. Try not to worry about why. Just, it does. And when's it going to start? When's it going to stop? I don't know. It does kind of suck. I'll tell you, because after 4 or 5 nights of this and it goes away, on that 6th night when you're finally like, I trust this is going to happen, and you're jacking up basals and bolusing and everything, and then it turns out the growth spurt's over, and now you're waking up somebody at 1 a.m. going, hi, would you like a chicken sandwich and a banana?
Right.
It sucks, but it works well for those 6 days, and in my opinion, it's better than being high for 6 days and just saying, oh, it'll come back again.
Right.
I just think that's how I would handle it.
Correct. And I think, you bring in a good point in just the comment of when it comes back again, because it will. Mm-hmm. Little kids grow and grow and grow and grow. And even teens, up to a certain point, girls grow for less time than teen boys do. I mean, teen boys can grow up and into even 18 to 20 years, some boys. I mean, most often majority is done by 18 years. But most girls are pretty done growing up by about 16 years old.
Yeah, they look so much older than the boys, even when they're 13, 14, like in that range too.
Right. So, know that in the nature of all the testing and the things that we've talked about in the other podcasts and the figure out the basal and figure out the ratios and all that kind of stuff, it's not a number that's going to sit there until they're well into their adulthood, when maybe a variable component of their lifestyle changes, where they will need to make an adjustment. Kids needs change. Mm-hmm. That's the simplest way to say it. Kids needs change. So don't think you're crazy if you go for a couple of weeks and you're like, I got this. It looks like it's working magically. And then, like, professionally, I get these emails that are like, I thought we had this all figured out. It was all working beautifully, and now the last 3 nights, this is happening again. I'm like, okay, well, we need to adjust, right? So
Jenny answers those emails by, how do you think we stay in business? It's because it's gonna keep changing. But no, I genuinely think that's a great answer for that. Okay. Richard says, any tips for being bold with insulin while using Medtronic 670G in auto mode? You basically can't adjust the basal other than temporarily turning on the target of 150 BG instead of 120, and it auto-calculates bolus based on carbs, BG, or a combination of both. It won't do a correction bolus unless you tell it your BG is above 150. It adds up to great time in range stats for me, range being 70 to 180, but I'm spending a lot of time at the upper end of that range, and I'd like to be closer to the 120. I know Arden and Jenny are potters, but I think Jenny's colleague Gary uses 670G. Maybe, well, Richard, I don't know how comfortable I am with everyone knowing so much about our lives, but but I finally have some insight into this automated pumping thing. My brain is starting to almost get all the way around it, but Jenny's going to go first because I've never seen the 670G before.
Yeah, so the 670G,
Such a long pause.
It is a long pause because I have to be kind of, good in the way that I explain it, because the 670G can be phenomenal for some people, not the majority of people, but for some people, it does work quite well. Who does it work quite well for? If you have a pretty structured life, if you have a pretty typical breakfast, lunch, dinner, you always go to the gym between 4 and 5 p.m., it can be a really good system for holding you a lot more stable. It does do a really nice job for the most part, again, in that type of a life for the overnights. Similar to the other, systems that do something like this with the augmentation to the basal and how it goes up and down. But I can say that the 670, for a good majority of people, with the variability of today's lifestyle, it doesn't meet need. And for one really specific group, women in pregnancy, it doesn't meet need because it doesn't target the right blood sugar, at least not right now. I'm not saying Medtronic isn't working on that. From what I understand, future iterations will have lower targets and different things to it. But the current 670, it targets the 120. I would say for most people who are having success with it, they're typically getting an average blood sugar of about like 140-ish, not really 120, even though technically it's targeting that. And this question kind of alludes to that piece, is that it's really not allowing any corrections unless you're above a higher number than you really want to be at anyway. Right? And it's only correcting you down to 150.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So it's never really getting you to that that technical target. The other component to the system is that it's not using your current manually set basal profile to work off of with its increasing and decreasing of insulin dosing through the course of the day based on glucose change. We kind of call it the secret sauce of whatever Medtronic has figured out in their algorithm. The system, a couple of days of manual mode use, gets an idea of your average of insulin need and kind of like a sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
And your sensitivity to insulin. And what it does then is it essentially doses your insulin along the course of time in a day based on what it has seen your sensitivity look like. So really the only factor that in auto mode 670 is using is your insulin to carb ratio. If you've got it set at a 1 to 10, you're going to get dosed off of a 1 to 10 along with where your blood sugar is and that kind of stuff. But even your ISF or your sensitivity correction factor, that is not what auto mode is using.
Okay.
So, it's kind of a long...
But it's a limit. I guess you call it a limitation of the system.
Right.
But not a limitation. I guess it's how it was designed to work. It's
correct.
Working the way. And I see the problem. If you're at that top end of that range, you're 175 and you're heading up, and without intervention, you're going to get to 240, but it only intervenes enough to try to get you from 175 back to 150, then that's where it won't work.
Correct.
Don't forget what Companion Medical wants you to know. They want you to know about the InPen. The InPen is not just this beautiful Bluetooth-enabled insulin pen. It's also an app that works in Congress, in Symphony, think of another word that means like altogether. Between your app, the pen, and your Dexcom continuous glucose monitor. The app's going to give you an at-a-glance look at your current status, from last dose to active insulin to recent doses. It has a dosing calculator to help take the guesswork out of dosing. That's a huge help for MDI, right? You'll be able to enter your blood glucose and what you intend to eat, and the correct dose will be recommended to you by the InPen app. Now, come on. If you're MDI, you got to admit, this seems like a leap, right? There's dosing reminders and reports and temperature alerts, just a whole bunch of stuff, but you'll learn all about it when you get there, when you get to companionmedical.com. So for those of you looking to take a pump break, for those of you who are already doing injections and just wish you had a little more zhuzh, you know what I mean? InPen's the way to go. I want to thank them, of course, for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast, and I will thank them by reminding you to go to companionmedical.com to find out more. Uh-oh, there's extra time left. InPen is terrific! Why are you not trying the InPen? Go get InPen today. companionmedical.com. Or on the links. Wait, hold on a second. Go even deeper. Check it out today at companionmedical.com.
Many people will complain in auto mode about getting what we call kicked out of auto mode and kicked back to manual. Two scenarios. One, in the example you give, as blood sugar is rising and the system is microbolusing along the way. They don't call it temp increase. They just call it this micro, like bolusing along the way. The system will only micro dose for a set amount of time.
Yeah.
Before it says, nope, can't help you anymore. And out of auto mode, you get kicked back into manual mode.
Okay.
So on the opposite end of that, if you're like low,
mm-hmm.
and it can only adjust so much in a low time period. So you could get kicked out of auto mode as well.
Can you leave auto on purpose?
You can. You can choose to turn auto mode off, going back to manual mode, which is, I've got a couple of people that I work with who've been using 670 for a number of years already, and they've figured out the tweaks and the tricks and the things, which we actually have on our website. Mm-hmm. We've got a lot of little tips for if you are using the 670. These are some of the little nuances, and this is how to like do it better, essentially. But some of the people I work with, just when they see a higher blood sugar and they know that the system isn't going to adjust it as well, they just go back to manual mode. They add a corrective, and they take care of it, and then they go back to auto mode once you're brought back to where you kind of want to be.
Yeah.
So
what I see with loop is, I now have figured out two things: when it looks like it isn't going to stop a rise, and how to get out of opening the loop. So as soon as I see that up, that I go, okay, that's not working for some reason, I bolus what I think is a significant amount. I bolus an hour's worth of her basal plus whatever I think the rise needs to correct. So it'll be sometimes I'll be like, open the loop and bolus 4 units, which is a lot of insulin to try to stop because what you're really looking at is a 135 diagonal up, which doesn't make any sense to put in for it, but it does if you understand what the algorithm's going to do next. So you're going to open the loop. It's going to go back down to your basal. It's not going to try to stop the rise anymore. It's just going to go to, for Arden now, I think it's like 2.4 or something like that an hour. So it'll go to that. So I've put in enough insulin to stop the arrow, stop the momentum, bring it back. And then when I get momentum coming back down, I've figured out, and I can't obviously pass this on to any of you, but I can look at the Dexcom graph and go,
when to close the loop.
Close it now, right? And so you close it now, and it's almost like flying or landing an airplane without your gauges, I guess. Like you just look at the ground and you go, I got to start pulling up right now. This is it. And it works. I can't believe I figured something out about looping, to be perfectly honest. A workaround for it. And it's a workaround that doesn't cause a problem later. The only way you can get messed up coming out of open loop is if you close the loop and then go right into a meal again. Because then you'll put in, and this just happened while we were doing this, Arden just put in 80 carbs for a large lunch that had a bagel involved in it. And she said, it didn't give me any insulin because we just came out of open loop. And I was like, that's all right, because I wanted this to be 11 units. So still put in the carb absorption as 40 over 2 hours, 40 over 3 hours, which, by the way, spreading out your carb absorptions
makes a difference too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it stops it from shutting off basal because it thinks, I have to stay on for a long time. You trick it. I am smarter than the loop, damn it. And then so you break it up 40 and 40, and then I just told her bolus all 11 units. So now it has the 11 units to work with. It has the absorption times in, and then it will make decisions about basal based off of those other two things. And more importantly, I win, Jenny, which is really the most important thing.
Arden wins, right?
Oh, wait. Yeah. Arden wins because she's healthy. I just meant I defeated that damn thing. I feel like I beat a robot in a sci-fi movie. Yeah, like it came at me with like a spinning axe and a torch, and I was like, I'm going to die. And then when it was over, I won. I was just like, I can't believe this
won.
Yeah. But that was
and why? Why are you winning? You're winning because you've watched and you've learned.
Absolutely. It took me a while. I mean,
right?
I am telling you this in October. And when did Arden go on loop? It's got to be like 6 months ago.
A while.
Right? And people at that time were like, oh my God, the Bold with Insulin guy is looping. We'll all have great directions for looping in just 3 days. And then you all emailed me for months, like, tell me what to do with looping. I was like, I'm still figuring it out. Yeah. And so when I tell people they're never mistakes, it's always a learning situation. That's exactly what I did. I hate to say, because I think it sounds a little douchey, but when I don't know what to do with diabetes, I go back to what we talk about in the podcast. I revert back to the basics and I go, okay, what's happening to me here? And then I apply one of those pro tip episodes until I know it's a little strange because I'm the one that said it the first time, but it's a great example of how in the middle of life, you can forget things you know. You know what I mean? Like just because it comes at you from a slightly different angle all of a sudden and it doesn't look the same as you expect it to, you panic and you go, different thing, don't know what to do, and it's over. But I just kept applying the tenets of the podcast until I figured out the loop thing. So I am so close to us doing that.
The same thing. I mean, I've learned a lot over now 2 years. Actually, today is my 2-year anniversary of using Loop.
This is your Loop anniversary?
I started on Halloween.
Did you really?
I did.
Was ballsy, yes. By the way.
It was. Well, actually, to be quite honest, as most people do, I started in closed loop the evening of October 30th. Mm-hmm. And by like the morning of the 31st, I was like, poop on open loop. I'm totally closing this. So I closed it, and it was actually really great. I mean, I got a chance to trick or treating with my boys and whatnot that evening. It was was really cool to be able to watch the system. And I would have usually applied like some type of temporary basal or just planned to like steal candy out of their like buckets as we trick or treated along the way. And it was really fun that Halloween because I didn't feel the need to pay attention, nor did I get any alerts while we were trick or treating because Loop was doing a great job.
Yeah. No,
and so I think it was kind of a fun day to have started it. So
don't test yourself a little bit, right? Don't start
but again, learning, I learned, like my coffee in the morning, I typically found pre-Loop, I had to have a half a unit of insulin to cover. Well, that wasn't based on carbs. It was just what I had learned to utilize, right? Well, now in Loop, I had to actually go back and figure out how much does that equate to as far as like a carb entry for Loop to really cover this the right way to offset that like caffeine rise and everything. So there's relearning to using these hybrid closed systems, whether it's the 670G or Loop or Open APS or whatever. There are pieces of things to learn that you weren't applying before. Or maybe you were, you just have to learn them a new way with these systems.
I think that's it. Arden right now is at lunch. She's 75, her blood sugar 75. Here's how the morning went. She got up in the morning with a pod that only had a couple of units left in it, so we swapped it running out the door. Swapped it as she's getting that little bit of a rise from the morning, right? So I see like a 120 is starting to creep up. She was 101 while she was getting dressed. All of a sudden she's 120. I threw in a unit from the old pod because I didn't want to waste it. Took off the old pod, put on the new pod, looked at what insulin was pending for Loop, bolused pending insulin. Then we driving to school, and I just noticed that I felt the number jump too much, and I was like, open the Loop and bolus 2 units. So now I'm thinking about pod change insulin, right? So we open the Loop, we bolus 2 units. It comes in perfectly. Forget to close the Loop this morning. I'm running around doing a bunch of stuff. We forget to close the Loop. So then something hits her where she needs more basal. Loop's not closed, doesn't work. She starts going back up again. 134 diagonal up at 9 a.m. Now I'm like, oh, she's got to eat in an hour and a half. Reopened the Loop, bolused more, 91 diagonal down when she wants to eat. And then you heard the rest. We closed the Loop, tried to do 80 carbs. It didn't want to give it to her. So I gave it, we set up the absorption times and gave the insulin anyway. And now she's eating and she's 75. And I'm telling you, 2 months ago, I don't even know where her blood sugar would be with Loop right now. It would have been a disaster, but I needed that disaster to happen so I could wrap my brain around the whole thing, really. So I'm doing very well with it now. Like I can't wait to see what her A1C ends up with being 3 full months of this kind of new space. All right.
And it kind of goes along with, I think one of the last times we did a chat like this, we kind of both talked about like taking a hit, right? And so I actually, for our newsletter, for our October newsletter, I actually did an article about what you can gain, like taking a step back in order to take 2 steps forward. You can learn from the hits that you end up taking. Well, my blood sugar didn't do great for, this 5-mile run that I planned. Okay, well, what did you do? Yep. What didn't work? And plan accordingly for next time. You can learn from taking some steps back.
100%. You have to stop. Every once in a while, you just have to broaden your scope and stand back and see the whole picture because you're just too in the fight. It's funny. It's a completely strange thought, but I think in my mind it's the same thing. Phillies hired a new manager the other day, Joe Girardi. He was a really successful manager with the Yankees for a decade. Left there and has been out of baseball for a couple of years. And he said, I heard him in an interview, and he goes, sometimes when you're in it, it's hard to see it. He's like, you're in this fight and you're so focused on winning, or I guess in this situation, you're so focused on your blood sugar being where you want it to be, you don't see how it is you're losing or winning. You don't know why anything's working or not working. You're just in there swinging hands, And so I think that's a perfect scenario. I think you got to step back and just look at the big picture sometimes. All of these things that have been on T-shirts for the last 50 years, have been there for a good reason. It had
Yeah.
everything we just said about 670G and looping. Does it apply to basal IQ as well?
So I think it probably will apply more to control IQ.
Okay.
Because basal IQ really is only a predictive low glucose suspend, right? So the system is looking for glucose to be less than 80 within the next 30 minutes.
Okay.
And if the trend in glucose is happening such that that's going to be the case, then it predictively suspends the insulin delivery on a basal level. But the interesting thing about it is that it actually doesn't do only basal suspension. It also suspends an extended bolus.
Okay.
So if you are using basal IQ and you have a trend happening and basal IQ kicks in and you've got an extended bolus, your extended bolus will be stopped.
Okay.
And so once basal IQ kicks things back on, you have to remember to go back in and either resume an extension of what was missed or just bolus for the rest of what was missed, depending on how long basal IQ was kicked off. So that's a kind of a nuance to that system. And control IQ will be, I would say, closest in similarity to 670G. Neither of those systems are by any means close to looping in any sense, loop, open APS, Android APS. The current approved sort of hybrid closed are just not. From the basic information about the research of the control IQ and the people who have used it in the trials, it seems to do a good job. Again, it's conservative, similar to the 670G in what it does, but some of the factors that it uses to adjust, from what I understand, it does use your set basal in the background to adjust off of, rather than its own secret sauce of applying a basal. Does use your current sensitivity factor as well as your carb ratio. So that, in my opinion, clinically, and like if I was going to use it personally, I think that those are big steps beyond 670 because it's using some things that is, as we've talked about, if you know that your settings are good, why wouldn't you want a system to work off of what you already know is working?
Right.
To a degree, right?
It seems like these systems are set up. I'm sure there are people who have been living their lives in the 200s and the 300s who are on these systems and think this is amazing.
Right.
It's just not the next level of what can be done. Okay. And I'm assuming they were set up on purpose like that. That's what they were made for. And they're probably doing a really good job for the people they're working for.
Correct. Yeah.
Huge thanks to InPen from Companion Medical for sponsoring today's show. And of course to Jenny Smith from Integrated Diabetes. Did you know you can hire Jenny? You can. You can go to integrateddiabetes.com and then find Jenny. I don't know what, you'll do it. You'll figure it out. And then you can email her. Also, right there in the show notes, there's Jenny's email address. That's probably easier. You click on that, you send Jenny an email. Here's what the email says. Excuse me. I'm composing. Dear Jenny, I heard you on the Juicebox Podcast, comma, I love you, exclamation point. Can I please give you money to help me? Question mark. And then you sign your name and she'll get back to you.